All right, well, let's move on to another topic, which again I believe would be quite relevant, and that is with respect to severance packages that employees could get if they are laid off by employers. At this point of time, as we are grappling with the deadly coronavirus and it is bringing along with it its own set of implications on the economic front and hence on individual corporates' finances, it's unsurprising really to be seeing a lot of companies laying off people, not just startups. I'm talking about well-established old companies as well that have had to lay off a couple of people. For example, just today we had a report saying that HSBC is once again reviving its plan to lay off thousands of people. So every big corporate is at this point of time mulling layoffs, and hence we decided to bring on board this topic: severance packages for employees. What does an employer have to take care of, ensure that an employer does when they are laying off or giving pink slips to employees? So that's a topic that we decided to talk about today on the show. Again, like I mentioned, it's pretty relevant. It's something that everybody should take note of. There are various, in fact, provisions as well in the law that do enable an employee to know exactly what an employee would be entitled to and what an employer needs to pay. So let's take this conversation forward. We have with us Pooja Ramchandani, partner with Shardul Amarchand Mangaldas. Pooja, great having you back with us on the Money Show today. I hope you and your family are doing well, keeping safe. Let's start off first with the fact that we've seen so many layoffs by not just small companies but big companies as well. So to start off with, if an employer has to issue an employee a pink slip, at the beginning, what do both these parties need to know about severance packages?
Hi Mubina, great to be back and hope you and the entire ETNA crew are well and safe. So to jump right into your question, a severance package comprises of statutory payments as well as contractual payments. And payments under statutes depend on the category of employee, the tenure, and the wages of an employee. Contractual payments, on the other hand, are driven by employment agreements and company policies. So as a first step for employers is to examine which category an employee falls under, i.e. whether an employee is a workman or a non-workman. To explain very quickly, a workman is any person employed in any industry to do any skilled, unskilled, technical, operational, clerical, or manual work. And on the other hand, a non-workman, broadly speaking, is a person whose job is mainly managerial or administrative or supervisory in nature. In the case of supervisory functions, the monthly wages need to be above 10,000 rupees to qualify as a non-workman. The next step for an employer would be to determine the entitlements under statutes and contracts. For example, a workman category employee who has completed 1 year of continuous service would be entitled to a retrenchment compensation under the Industrial Disputes Act. And an employee who has completed 4 years and 8 months of continuous service would be entitled to a gratuity payment under the Payment of Gratuity Act. Going forward, a bonus payment is also payable under the Payment of Bonus Act to employees who have worked for 30 days and whose monthly wages is less than 21,000 or less. With respect to contractual payments, the company policies would need to be examined to understand the entitlements and the quantum of these payouts. For example, several companies grant ESOPs to senior level employees. ESOP schemes provide for whether options can be exercised on termination or will be forfeited. Typically, in redundancy-related terminations, ESOPs can be exercised within a stipulated period of time following termination of employment. So, as you can see, the severance packages will differ from employee to employee depending on several factors.
All right. Okay. Understood. So what do employers owe employees when they are essentially issuing them the pink slip, Pooja?
So to start with, of course, employers owe all payments prescribed under the several statutes and under the contract and the company policies, subject to an employee being eligible, as I mentioned earlier. So to go further, payments under the statutes would comprise of wages, encashment of accumulated and unutilized earned leave, bonus, gratuity, and retrenchment compensation. Payments under contracts and policies differ from company to company and typically include superannuation related payments, ESOP related payouts, cash incentives, performance bonus, etc.
So statutory and non-statutory, the non-statutory ones may be something that has been mentioned in the contract. But Pooja, obviously if it's mentioned in the contract, an employee would be entitled to receive that as well, correct?
Right.
Even if it's not statutory, it's not mentioned in the law.
That's right. So a lot of employment contracts provide for bonus and variable payments or superannuation, which is not a statutory payment, over and above what are the statutory payouts under law. And that's what a remuneration package usually comprises of. So where you are looking at pink slips in the current form where there are redundancies or reduction of workforce. So in these situations, all of these payments which have been promised by way of a contract is payable to an employee.
Okay, all right. When we talk about the severance package, Pooja, though, when you say, the remuneration, of course, the salary for the period for which, this individual has worked, leave, travel, encashment, gratuity, etc. And then there's severance package. So is that over and above all of these payments as you have bracketed? Is a severance package over and above all of that a compensation of sorts that means?
When I use the term severance package, I will look at the term in a broad concept which has many sub payments in it. It's a big basket which has these several payouts. So it has the payout of a severance compensation, it has a payout of gratuity where eligible, it has the payout of variable amounts where eligible, it has the payout of the last drawn wages. So all of these things provide come under the basket of severance package.
Okay, understood. All right. Now, you mentioned eligible employees, Pooja, right at the beginning of the question, right at the first answer rather. So, just want to understand, for which category of employees is severance payments mandatory under law?
Yeah. So, under Indian labor law, there is a statute called Industrial Disputes Act. Now, under the Industrial Disputes Act, which primarily governs termination in case of redundancies of workman category employees, prescribes for the payment of a retrenchment compensation. Now, this retrenchment compensation is the severance compensation essentially, which is payable only to the workman category as the law provides. So when you look at statutorily required payments of severance compensation per se, it is only for workmen category. There's, however, one exception to the rule. In the states of Andhra Pradesh and Telangana, there is a statute called the Shops and Establishments Act. Now, these legislations provide for something called a severance, a service compensation actually. And this service compensation is akin to a severance compensation, which is payable to employees who are not eligible for gratuity under the Payment of Gratuity Act. And what one needs to be mindful here is that this service compensation in Andhra Pradesh and Telangana is payable to even the non-workman category employees. Other than that, it's quite common for companies to have policies on payment of a severance amount in case of redundancy related terminations. But that's contractual and not statutory.
Okay, understood. So it can get a little complex. There are a couple of jargons, but I think largely, Pooja, you've broken it down well, for the non-law experts to essentially, like me, to be able to understand it. All right, Pooja, now let's talk about essentially the options that are available when you are receiving these severance packages or whatever you can call it. I understand an employer can dole it out either in a staggered manner or in a lump sum manner. How exactly can an employee choose? And firstly, of course, does an employee get to choose that on how they receive their compensation when they're being laid off?
Well, it's not uncommon for an employee to be given the option to choose a staggered payment. But if you are going to look at what is permitted under the law, when you look at the statutory payments, as I mentioned, retrenchment, compensation, now the law provides that the retrenchment compensation should be payable on the day of retrenchment. B, for gratuity, there is a 30 days time frame which is prescribed for payment of this compensation from the date the claim is made. So one has to keep in mind that there are statutory requirements in terms of time frame for making the statutory payments, and there the law does not envisage a staggered payment as such. But when we look at the contractual payouts, there we can always have a staggered payment so that an employee can get a constant flow of funds over a period of time, which also sometimes helps. And that is something which has to be on a consensual basis between employer and employee, and of course subject to the company policies also.
Okay, all right. So just to make it clear, Pooja, there are two kinds of essentially compensations. One, of course, is something that the statute requires, the law requires, and the other one is what essentially is mentioned in the employment contract. Pooja, whatever is mentioned in the employment contract and what is, of course, as per the statute, an employee that is being issued the pink slip would have rights to get both from their employer. If you can just sort of, to sum up our conversation, if you can just, clear that out for us.
Right. The employee would be entitled to receive both.
Okay, great, excellent. Pooja, thanks so much for that. It was lovely getting you on board. Folks, just to essentially summarize what Pooja has mentioned, if you are unfortunately being issued the pink slip, firstly you need to ensure that you are eligible to receive certain compensations as per the statute. Wages, leave encashment, gratuity, statutory bonus, retrenchment compensation are all sort of eligible payouts for workmen under the statutory payments, which is basically prescribed by the law. And then of course you have contractual payments. So under contractual payments, there's your superannuation, there's ESOPs and other incentives. But those are of course not prescribed by law, though mind you, if they are in your contract, then it would be enforceable. Employers will have to pay that out to employees. Then of course there's the Industrial Disputes Act as well, where employers do need to comply with the retrenchment process that's given in the act. Furthermore, lump sum and stagger. Sometimes employees would prefer to stagger the payment so that it's easier for them as well to spread out the cash flow, manage their cash flow in a better way. Contractual payments can be staggered, but when it comes to statutory payments, you will usually receive that in a lump sum basis. For contractual payments, you can always go to your HR department and say that, look, you can pay me this in a staggered manner, so it will help you as well, to manage your cash flows. And do remember that only workman category employee is entitled to retrenchment compensation. Service compensation can be given to non-workmen, but only in the state of Andhra Pradesh. So there you have it, folks, everything that you need to know. In the unfortunate event that you are being laid off, there are certain compensation packages that you would be entitled to. All right, well, let's move on and now talk about another big event that took place last weekend, and that is Vodafone Idea paying off almost about 100 crore rupees for Franklin Templeton. Now, folks, this is important. I'll tell you why. This money that Franklin Templeton has received is essentially going to be distributed among the various units of Franklin Templeton, and more importantly, those units that were all set to be wound up. Extremely important to understand this, because it means that this money, which was earlier side pocketed, is now going to be coming into your account. There will be taxation implications of the same. You could perhaps have to pay capital gains tax as well on this, because it was earlier written down. When earlier as well this had happened, where AMCs were side pocketing some of these assets where they believed recoverability probability was low. The NAVs accordingly fell, right? The value of mutual funds accordingly fell. And a lot of our PF experts as well that we spoke to did say that, look, the worst case scenario has been taken into account by these AMCs, which means they believe that they're not going to be able to recover anything from these companies. But clearly, in this Vodafone case, they have, and hence there could be tax implications. Okay, well, with that, we're out of time on this episode of The Money Show. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Do send in your feedback, comments, and queries on The Money Show at etnow.tv. It's a goodbye from us.